Okay, so have you ever seen that movie Idiocracy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Remember that scene where they're trying to water the crops with Brawndo? Like,
Oh.
what, instead of water, they're using like a sports drink?
Yeah, yeah, the thirst mutilator.
And it's funny, right? But it also kind of makes you wonder,
Yeah.
are we really that far off from a world where,
Right.
corporations have that much influence over, like,
Mhm.
our basic needs?
Yeah, it's a really powerful image. And that article that you sent me,
Yeah.
it really digs into that. Like,
Exactly.
is Idiocracy just a silly comedy?
Yeah.
Or is it like, a cautionary tale for
Yeah.
our time?
For those who haven't seen it, Idiocracy basically imagines a future where intelligence has taken a nosedive.
Right.
And these two kind of average folks wake up 500 years in the future
Wow.
to a world that is just completely bonkers.
Yeah.
Ruled by a president who used to be like a wrestler.
Uh-huh.
The crops are failing. Garbage is everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And common sense seems to have gone extinct. So the article asks, is this just a movie?
Yeah.
Or is this a glimpse into what our future could look like?
Well, what I find so fascinating about this movie
Yeah.
is that it uses satire
Uh-huh.
to, make its point. Like, on the surface, it's a comedy.
Right.
But underneath, there's this really sharp commentary
Yeah.
about, where society might be headed.
It's almost like the movie is holding up this funhouse mirror to our world
Uh-huh.
and exaggerating our flaws just enough
Right.
to make us stop and think, wait, are we really doing this?
Exactly. Yeah. And Mike Judge, the director,
Yeah.
he's like a master of this kind of social commentary.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. He's the guy behind Beavis and Butthead,
Oh, yeah.
King of the Hill, and even Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And all of these, shows, they use humor
Mm-hmm.
to expose the absurdity
Yeah.
of, like, human behavior.
Right. So Idiocracy isn't just mindless entertainment.
Yeah.
It's a chance to really kind of examine our own world
Yeah.
and see if we recognize any of these trends
Right.
playing out around us.
And the article you sent me, it focuses on three main parallels
Okay.
between the movie and our current reality.
Okay.
And I think these will really resonate with you, especially given your interest in, like, sustainability
Yeah.
and how the choices we make today
Uh-huh.
impact the future.
So the first one is the one we already touched on, the power of corporations.
Right.
And in Idiocracy, Brawndo replacing water, that's a pretty extreme example.
Right.
But it highlights how corporations can really prioritize profit over,
Yeah.
well, pretty much everything else.
Yeah. And that's something we see in the real world, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, just think about all the debates that happen over things like environmental regulations
Yeah.
or the influence of big pharma.
It makes you wonder if we're letting corporations kind of call the shots
Right.
on things that should be driven by,
Right.
actual science and the common good.
Yeah, that brings us to, like, the second parallel. The decline of critical thinking
Right.
and the rise of what the article called fake intellectualism,
Yeah.
where in the movie, people are more concerned with, like, sounding smart
Yeah.
than actually, like, being informed.
Oh, yeah.
That's stuff familiar at all?
Especially with social media, it feels like everybody's an expert,
Right.
even if their expertise is based on, like,
Yeah.
a 15-second video they saw on TikTok or something.
Exactly. And it's so hard to,
Yeah.
sort through all that noise
Yeah.
and figure out, like, what's actually true.
Absolutely.
And in this world, right, where
Yeah.
information spreads so quickly,
Yeah.
it's even more important to be able to, like, think critically,
Yeah.
evaluate sources.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just letting ourselves be manipulated
Right.
by whoever has the loudest voice
Yeah.
or, the slickest presentation.
And finally, the article talks about how Idiocracy portrays a world
Yeah.
where entertainment is dumbed down to the extreme. Like, it's all instant gratification. Yeah. Mindless spectacle. Right. Kind of like reality TV on steroids.
Yeah, and this isn't just about entertainment, though, right? It's
Right.
about how this constant exposure
Yeah.
to this, like, simplified content,
Yeah.
it might be impacting our ability to think deeply and
Yeah.
engage with, like, complex issues.
Like, we're so used to these quick sound bites
Right.
and easy answers
Yeah.
that we just, we lose our patience for nuance and critical thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like our brains are being rewired
Uh-huh.
to crave the mental equivalent of junk food.
Yeah.
We want our information fast,
Right.
easy to digest, and preferably entertaining.
Right.
But just like a diet of junk food can lead to, like, health problems,
Yeah.
a diet of junk information can lead to, like, intellectual and societal problems.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
The article paints a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
And while I know it's satire, it's hard not to see some of these trends playing out in the real world. Are we doomed to become Idiocracy?
I wouldn't say doomed.
Okay.
But I do think that the movie serves as like a wake-up call.
Okay.
You know, it's not about predicting the future. It's about recognizing potential pitfalls.
Right.
And, you know, taking action.
So let's talk about action.
Yeah.
What can we do to make sure we don't end up living in a world where Brando is the national drink? And the most popular form of entertainment is watching somebody get repeatedly kicked in the groin.
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that we're not powerless.
Okay.
The fact that you're even asking these questions, that you're taking the time to dive into this material, it shows that you're engaged, you're thinking critically about these issues.
Okay.
So that's already a step in the right direction.
That's a good point, but awareness alone doesn't feel like enough.
Right.
What else can we do practically speaking?
Well, the article touches on this idea of like embracing critical thinking, not just as like a concept, but as a daily practice. You know, it's about being more discerning about the information we consume.
Okay.
Questioning assumptions.
Yeah.
Being willing to engage in thoughtful discussion.
Right.
Even when they get uncomfortable.
So we need to be more skeptical, more curious.
Yeah.
And more willing to challenge our own biases.
Exactly. And we need to be willing to like call out BS when we see it.
Okay.
Whether it's in advertising or politics or even just like casual conversations.
I like that call out BS. It's like a personal responsibility. We all have a way to kind of fight back against the forces that might be pushing us towards idiocracy.
It's also about like supporting quality journalism and media literacy initiatives.
Okay.
We need to equip ourselves and future generations with the tools to navigate, you know, this increasingly complex information landscape.
That makes sense if we're going to combat misinformation and manipulation.
Right.
We need to be able to tell the difference between reliable sources and, well, everything else that's out there.
Absolutely. And it's not just about being like a savvy consumer of information.
Right.
It's also about being an active participant in shaping the information landscape.
Okay.
You know, that means supporting organizations that are fighting for a free and independent press.
Right.
And it means holding those in power accountable for the information that they put out into the world.
So it's a multi-level approach, individual responsibility, community action, and systemic change.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And while it can feel overwhelming,
right,
it's important to remember that even small actions can have like a ripple effect.
Like, what are some examples of small actions that people can take?
Well, on a personal level, it could be as simple as choosing to read a well-researched article instead of just scrolling through headlines on social media or taking the time to have a respectful conversation with somebody who has a different viewpoint than you.
Or maybe watching Idiocracy and using that as a springboard. Exactly. For a discussion about these themes with friends or family.
It's about like planting those seeds of awareness and encouraging others to think critically about the world around them.
So we've talked about the problems. We talked about some potential solutions.
Right.
But I'm also curious about the role of humor in all of this.
Yeah.
You know, Idiocracy itself is a comedy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if laughter can be a tool for change.
I think humor is incredibly powerful.
Okay.
It can be a way to like disarm people, break down defenses, and to open up spaces for conversations that might not otherwise happen.
Right.
Sometimes laughing at the absurdity of a situation is the first step towards recognizing that something needs to change.
It's like if you can laugh at it, maybe you can also start to question it.
And maybe even start to imagine a different way.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the one key message you want to leave listeners with?
I think Idiocracy isn't a prediction.
Okay.
It's a provocation.
Right.
It's a challenge to us to be more aware, more engaged, and more thoughtful about the world that we're creating. You know, don't let the movie become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Choose to be the change you want to see.
Right.
Even if it starts with something as simple as like turning off the TV and picking up a book.
Or having a real conversation with someone instead of just like firing off another snarky comment on social media.
Or maybe just taking a moment to appreciate the simple things in life.
Yes.
Like a glass of clean water.
Especially the water.
Yeah. It's interesting because the movie makes it seem like sliding into Idiocracy was inevitable.
Right.
But I think what we're saying is it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. The movie's using that exaggerated future to kind of hold a mirror up to our present. But it's not destiny.
Right.
It's a warning.
Right.
We still have choices.
Thinking back to the article, it does mention that Idiocracy seems even more relevant today than when it came out like almost 20 years ago.
That really struck me too.
Yeah.
It makes sense though, right? We are living in a time of like unprecedented technological advancement.
Yeah.
Which has brought incredible benefit.
Of course.
But also new challenges.
Right.
I mean, information overload.
Yeah.
Social media echo chambers.
Yeah.
The rise of fake news.
Yeah.
Like these are all things that could potentially contribute to that kind of intellectual decline that the movie satirizes.
It can feel a little overwhelming, like we're caught in this current that's just sweeping us towards a future we might not want.
But we're not just passive passengers on this current.
Okay.
We can choose to swim against it.
Okay.
Even if it's just a little bit at a time.
So how do we do that?
Well, we've already talked about some individual actions. Like being more discerning about the information that we consume.
Yeah.
Engaging in thoughtful conversations. And supporting quality journalism.
Right.
But I think it's also important to think about collective action. Well, like how can we work together to create a more informed and engaged society? That
brings to mind something that the article mentioned about the importance of education. Like it argued that we need to do a better job of teaching critical thinking skills in schools so that future generations are better equipped to navigate the complexities of the world.
We need to equip young people with the tools to analyze information, identify biases, and construct their own well-informed opinions. We need to teach them to be curious, to question assumptions, and to be open to different perspectives.
I like that it's about empowering the next generation to be more thoughtful and discerning than maybe we've been.
It's also about fostering a culture that values knowledge and intellectual curiosity. Like, think about how often intelligence is mocked or dismissed in our society. We need to shift that narrative to celebrate people who are thoughtful and engaged, even if they don't always have the loudest voices.
You know, thinking back to Idiocracy, the movie itself is kind of a testament to the power of storytelling. It's a comedy. But it also sparked this really important conversation about, you know, the direction of our society.
That's the power of art, right? It can entertain us, but it can also challenge us. Make us think differently about the world. And even inspire us to act.
So maybe that's a good takeaway for our listeners. Don't underestimate the power of stories. Whether it's a movie, a book, a song, or even just a conversation. Stories can shape the way we see the world.
Absolutely.
And they can even motivate us to change it.
I think that's a great place to end our deep dive. Idiocracy may seem like a silly comedy on the surface. But it offers a lot of food for thought about the choices that we're making as individuals and as a society.
We've explored the parallels between the movie and our current world. Talked about the potential risks of falling into the traps of anti-intellectualism and information overload. And most importantly, discussed how we can actively choose a different path.
The future isn't predetermined. We still have the power to shape it. And that starts with being aware, engaged, and committed to creating a world where intelligence and critical thinking are valued, not ridiculed.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Absolutely.
And remember, the next time you reach for a glass of water, take a moment to appreciate it. Because in the world of Idiocracy, you might just be drinking Brando.
Exactly.